Welcome. Do you care? The name of our topic today, we're going to discuss a piece of the Parsha where you see what really caring is about. In order to do so, we're going to get into a Rashi and try to understand in depth why Rashi says what he does and how he differs in the explanation here from other places. Parshas Pinchas is in Chumash Bamidbar, which is the fourth book, and it's called Bamidbar, which means in the desert, and it talks about the things that happen with the Yidden while we were in the desert, some extreme things, like we have the Chet HaMeraglim, the sin of the spies, the complaints that the Yidden had after that, the Misoinanim, where they will just call it the complainers, the decree that the Yidden have to stay there for another 40 years, the uprising of Kairach, the rebellion of Kairach and his group, and many wars that we had as we were passing through in the desert. So it's a Chumash which talks about the desert and things that went on in the desert. However, in Chazal, specifically in Gemara Masechta Yuma, Daf Samaches Amud Beis, Chazal referred to this Chumash as Chumash HaPikudim, the Chumash of numbers. The reason why it's called the Chumash of numbers is because there's counting in this Chumash. In the beginning, we started with counting the Yidden in Parshas Bamidbar. And in our Parsha again, there's the mitzvah to count. So you start with counting, and then almost towards the end, just three to the end, again we're counting the Yidden. So it gives it this name of the whole Parsha, the whole Chumash is really about numbers. Now, in our Parsha, why do we have numbers? The counting was after the plague, which was a result of the story when Pinchas killed Zimri. At the end of last week's Parsha, we concluded with the actually very sad situation, and that was a result of Bilam, who advised Balak that after he failed miserably to curse the Jewish people, not only could he not curse us, but he actually caused to bring about some of the greatest blessings, some of the greatest brachas. He said, if you do want to get the Yidden, I obviously cannot curse them, but Hashem, their God, hates certain behaviors. And if you'll get the daughters of Mayav to come into the camp, etc., that you don't need any cursing. It'll get done on its own. And Balak did exactly that. And as a result, there was a terrible sinning happening in the camp. And to the extent, without getting into the whole all the details, but Zimri went to Moshe Rabbeinu and in a publicly defiant way expressed his interest and went to sin with the princess of Moab. Pinchas was the one that stood up, and he went and he stopped this plague by zealously killing Pinchas and the one he was with. That's Zimri and the one he was with. Thank you. But after that plague, Hashem tells Moshe, I want you to count the Jewish people. I want you to count. Let's see how many we have. Now, Rashi talks about this, and if you listen closely to what Rashi says, there's a lot of questions here. I want to address them and see the message that we could take from this. Rashi tells us, Vahi acharei hamagefa was after the plague. Rashi says, Moshel l'reya. This is analogous to a shepherd. A shepherd is watching a whole herd of sheep, a flock of sheep. And shenichnasu ze'ev, and wolves went into this herd of sheep, and they killed among the sheep a bunch of sheep. So the shepherd is counting them, says Rashi, to know how many do we have left. Okay. Similarly, when the Yidden are going, unfortunately, experience the plague, and we're like the sheep. Moshe is like our shepherd. So Hashem says, count them. Okay, then Rashi gives another explanation because it's at this stage that the Yidden will be switched or transferred from one shepherd to the next, from Moshe to Yeshua, so Hashem wants to count then as well. But the first explanation from Rashi, which is the main explanation, Rashi says it's analogous to a shepherd. There was an attack on his herd and his flock, and therefore he brings in the census. He wants to count how many does he have. Okay, which is fine. However, the question here is, who is the shepherd? Moshe is the shepherd. Hashem is not the shepherd in this context. So why do we say that the shepherd wants the counting. It's Moshe that's asking for the counting. Okay, number one. And even before that, why do you have to say anything altogether? What's misunderstood here? Rashi, as a principle, only tells us things which we can't figure out on our own. He's talking to a Bechamesh Lemikra, to a 5-year-old that's learning the Chumash, and he wants to make sure that in basic pshat, you understand what's going on. And if there's a question which doesn't allow you to understand the pshat, then Rashi comes in and tells us some kind of explanation. But otherwise, Rashi's not going to give us, there are other commentaries which give us deeper explanations and drush and soid. Rashi's focus is pshat. What's not understood, the Rashi altogether has to come and tell us it's an example of a shepherd and so on. You're counting, there was a plague. It's not so difficult to comprehend what's going on here. But if Rashi is doing that, why do you say it's like a shepherd? Now, this is not the first time we have accounting. And last time we had accounting, Rashi did tell us something. And Rashi said that this is an example of sheep hachaviva al ba'aleho. He didn't use the term shepherd. He said they were sheep who were cherished to their owner, to their master. And the master, the owner, wants to do accounting after a plague. Okay? So here you're talking about wolves and a shepherd. Over there you're talking about a owner, not a shepherd, and not wolves. You're talking about a plague. So why this difference? Last time when there was a plague, Rashi said the owner wanted accounting because there was a plague. It fits much more similar to our case. And in this case, you're telling me no. There was a shepherd and there were wolves, a totally different mushal. And again, everything in Rashi is very specific and is there for a purpose. Let's try to understand what's really going on here. There's a tremendous sikha from the Rebbe. It's printed in volume Ches, the 18th volume of the Kotei Sikha. The Rebbe discusses this, and he says like this. You have to understand what goes through a shepherd's mind when something happens to his sheep. Okay, there are two types of tragedies that could happen to the sheep in general. One is wolves come in and attack, and the other one is if there is a plague. Okay, when wolves come in to attack, the shepherd feels personally accountable how that was able to happen. A plague is beyond his control. Okay, he can't control a plague, but he could control, and he's supposed to control, wolves entering the herd, the flock, and attacking. That's why he's there. And after an attack like that, the shepherd goes home. He has nobody to blame. He can't say it was the weather. He can't say he goes home and he feels terrible because he didn't take care of his beloved sheep that are his responsibility, etc., etc. When there's a plague, the shepherd he feels bad, but he doesn't have a responsibility here. He doesn't see it in a way that I should have stopped it. I could have done something, and I didn't. What could I do? It's an epidemic. Okay? And this is the difference of what's going on over here and to the other place where there was unfortunately, the Yidden that died. Last time was after the Chet HaEgel. Where was Moshe Rabbeinu? He was on a mountain. He wasn't there. You can't blame him in the sense that there was wolves that were attacking. Why weren't you protecting your sheep? You should have chased away the wolf. You should have done something else. Moshe Rabbeinu was on a mountain learning Torah with Hashem, and the Yidden were doing what they were doing. So in that case, Rashi tells us, you know what went on here? It's an owner of the sheep. The shepherd is not counting them. The owner comes along and he says, how many sheep do I have left? The shepherd is, quote, an employee. He's doing his thing. I did what I had to do. I made sure no wolves came. Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from the mountain. Hashem says, count. And Rashi says this is exactly like an owner, that there was a plague, and he wants to know what's left. In our case, Moshe Rabbeinu was there. Not only there, but for other reasons that we discussed last week. This alma mimenu halacha, he forgot the halacha of how to react and deal with this particular case. And therefore, even Pinchas went, and we know the reason was in order that he should get the reward, but he went and he did his act and he stopped the plague. But in this case, Moshe Rabbeinu is right there. And Moshe Rabbeinu is the shepherd of the Yidden. Now, he's not held accountable for this. It's not his fault. Hashem wanted it to be this way. But Moshe himself feels a much stronger sense of responsibility in this context that Rashi is expressing by calling him a shepherd. Because here, you're there, and you could have protected, or you should have protected the situation. And this shows us how Rashi wants to teach us a message while the 5-year-old is learning Chumash about who Moshe is. What's Moshe dealing with? Moshe is dealing with a situation where people are dying. What kind of people? They worshipped idols. Okay, they were sinning with Bnais, the daughters of Midian. Okay, let's say it's 2 out of the 3 big ones. Okay, we know in Torah in general, a person is not supposed to die for the mitzvah. Okay, the exception is Shas Hashmad. If God forbid the culture or the government is trying to wipe out Yiddishkeit, then you could risk your life even for something small. But in general, if someone would come up to somebody and say, if you don't eat this non-kosher food, or if you don't break Shabbos, you'll have this and this consequence, you're not allowed to give up your life, and you have to eat that non-kosher food or break the Shabbos, whatever it may be. Besides 3, right? Idolatry, adultery, and murder. These 3, a person has to be killed and not transgress them under any circumstances. Now, in this case, in the camp of the Yidden, 2 of them out of the 3 are being violated. Okay? Gilui Arayos and Avodah Zarah. And they were happening together. And there, as a result of that, there's a plague. And not only that, but Zimri went and publicly, I don't want to use the word embarrassed, but expressed his defiance to Moshe Rabbeinu before he went and sinned. And all this is done in a display for everyone to recognize. So you would think that Moshe Rabbeinu would be like, good riddance. These people are bad. But that's not Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's not a Rebbe, and that's not a true leader, and that's not what the shepherd that Hashem wants for the Jewish people. He wants someone that cares, even for those that quote are bad, even those that are misbehaving, even those that know better. You know, Zimri wasn't just a guy, okay? He was a leader of a shevet, which, by the way, in another interesting talk, the Rebbe says, how could this be that Zimri, the leader of a shevet, goes and commits such a sin? You expect a much higher standard. And he says, if you look at the pasuk before, or the Medrash tells us, that the Yidden came to Zimri, Bnei Shiftei, Rashi actually quotes that, the people of his tribe came to him, tribe of Shimon, and they said, what's happening here? Things are out of control. Everyone people are dying, and you're just not doing anything to protect us. Help us. And he figured, and let's take this let's take it slowly. He figured, if I'm going to go and I'll commit the sin, then I'm lowering the standard and the expectation for everyone else. Hashem is looking down and he's saying, what's happening here? Okay, what are these people sinning? But if the head of the tribe is sinning, then what do you expect from them? You automatically modified almost the standard. You can't change the law. So in a very interesting shot, we're saying that Zimri was coming, he was completely wrong and he had to be killed and so on. But he was coming from a good place, from a sense of, I'm taking one for the team. That's something which again, it's hard to relate to and hard to understand, and it's a level of a nasi. But the concept is that Moshe could have looked at this crowd and said, listen, what happened. Not behaving like, oh, we got to count them. I'm a shepherd. I just lost some of my beloved sheep. That was Moshe Rabbeinu. There are many, many stories that we could share that express the Rebbe's care and the Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation of caring with sensitivity for another person. But I want to share one that happened with my wife's uncle, Rabbi Bitterman. He's a shliach in Vienna. He got a call from a shliach, Rabbi Zilberstein in Montreal. And he called him and he said, it's an emergency. I really have to talk to you. Drop everything you're doing. There's a Holocaust survivor in Montreal that just passed away. It was a she doesn't have any relatives. There's one friend that's very close. And they want to arrange a Jewish burial in Eretz Yisrael. The problem is that the authorities will not let something as big as that happen unless a family member comes and signs for it. Whatever the case was, they said we need a family member to sign. There is no family members. There's one friend. Generally, the person was a very lonely person. They weren't really social. They weren't really involved. Went through a lot in their life, and that's how they behaved. But they didn't have a network. One friend. This friend is not authorized to sign for something like that. It's going through borders, different countries, a body, etc. It's not going to happen. She remembered that there's some distant relative in Vienna by this and this name. I want you, Rabbi Bitterman, to go, locate her, get her on the phone, and we'll arrange this. I said, listen, I don't mind to, of course, drop everything I'm doing and go try to take care of this, but it's the middle of the winter. Most people are on vacation now. I don't know this person. How am I ever going to reach her? But I'm going to try. They figure out the name, they get an address and a phone number, and he calls. No answer. So he goes there. He rings the bell, there's no answer. It's in a building. He rings the bell a second time, there's no answer. Finally, someone walks out of the building. So doors open, you go in. He goes to her apartment, knocks on the door, and again, there's no answer. What could he do? He called, he rang, he knocked. So he turns around to leave. As he's walking down to the hallway to the elevator, he meets an elderly woman. And he asks her, are you Mrs. Hillman? That was her name. She says, yes, I am. How can I help you? And he said, I'm really sorry, but your relative, I don't know even how close it was, and passed away. And we need you to speak to this and this office to figure out the burial situation. So she says, okay, I'm going to come. And she goes to the office, and they sit down, and they're calling, and there's a lot of challenges, obstacles. And both Shluchim, Rabbi Zilberstein and Rabbi Bitterman on the phone, and they're getting any connection or people that they know trying to get this involved to make this happen. And this relative is in the middle. And she's sitting there, and she's like, I want to tell you something. I had left on vacation, and I forgot my umbrella. And I came back to get my umbrella, and it's not raining, but I just had this, mishagas. I need my umbrella. And when I went back, that's when I saw you in the hallway. I mean, the chances, it's unbelievable. But my question to you, she says, is what's your connection here? You don't know her, and you don't know me. And Rabbi Bitterman doesn't know her and doesn't know me. So what's this whole, how you're spending a lot of time on this. Frankly, it's uncomfortable to go to some building and try to knock on a door. Where's this from? And so he said, actually, they both said that our Rebbe taught us the care and sensitivity for every person. Of course, whether you know them or you don't know them doesn't change. This is the way that we have to look at every single yid. It should be for happy occasions and so on. There's we find ourselves in the 3 weeks, and the 3 weeks is a time to have extra care and sensitivity for our fellow yidden. Okay, and in a way of sin of avas chinam, it's a senseless love. It's even not deserved and so on. We have this ava, and when you love somebody, you know what bothers them. The Moshe Leib of Sassever, the tzaddik, he was once traveling to collect money for Pidyon Shvuyim. Okay, there were many, unfortunately, Yidden that couldn't pay their rent, and their landlords would lock them up and throw them away in dungeons until some caring person would come in and ransom and bail them out. So once during his travels, he ended up in some inn. I don't know, the back roads of Ukraine probably, and it's a let's just say it's not the highest part of society in that particular town, and he's in a krechma, in an inn, in the bar. There was one room. And he sees two guys, locals, drunk completely. Not only are they drunk, but they're rolling on the floor. 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And one guy asks the other guy, Ivan, do you love me? And he says, of course, we've been drinking together for 50 years. What do you mean? He says, no, but do you really love me? He says, of course. He says, yeah, well, tell me what's bothering me. So he said, I don't know what's bothering you. He didn't tell me. He says, you don't love me. Because if you did, you would know what's bothering me. And the tzaddik, Rabbi Leib of Sassever, left, and he said, I learned a tremendous lesson in serving Hashem. That Avos Yisrael means not when a guy comes to you and says, I have this issue, can you help? But you care enough that you could figure out that something's wrong. You know what bothers them. That's a sensitivity, that's care. It's especially important in the 3 weeks to focus on this, to know that the solution to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and the whole reason why there is even this problem season, is we're here to fix something. We have more Avos Yisrael. We can start with ourselves and those closest to us, and then expand step by step to our community and to Am Yisrael and to the whole world and so on and so forth. But the idea is that the fixing of the Beis Hamikdash and the cause of the Churban is through Avos Yisrael, through love for one another. And one of the greatest times for this is Shabbos, because Shabbos, you don't have any display of mourning. You're not allowed to, halachically. That's why this year Shiva Asar B'Tammuz is pushed off to Sunday, and Tisha B'Av is pushed off to Sunday. But on Shabbos, we can't do anything that's mourning. Can't be sad, even in the 3 weeks. And the Rebbe stresses this a lot, and he says, make sure to be extra happy on these Shabbosim, so nobody should think that maybe your mourning in the 3 weeks is will be forbidden. So Avos Yisrael and on Shabbos in the 3 weeks is really the solution, the way that we solve this problem and being Mashiach here. I want to just share another piece which I think is important. I shared it yesterday. There's halacha. You can't destroy. You can't destroy. You can't do this to Hashem, your God. Which means when the Yidden went into Eretz Yisrael and we conquered, there were Avodah Zarah there. There were idols there, and those idols had to be destroyed. Houses of worship and so on. It was a mitzvah. But then Torah says another mitzvah. You're not allowed to do this to Hashem, which means you can't destroy a shul. Okay, you're not allowed to. It's a lav. Okay, there's also issues about tashchis. You can't destroy something that's productive, something that's good. You can't just go and destroy it. We're careful not to waste. The real term of tashchis is to destroy, but ruin can't do this. And Hashem goes and ruins not just a shul, the Beis Hamikdash, not once but twice. It's usher, and we know that Hashem does what He tells us to do. Every mitzvah that we're commanded to do, He does in some fashion. And if He told us He's not allowed to do it, He's not going to go and do it. And here He says, "Don't do it to me," and He goes and burns it down. And yes, it was sent through Nebuchadnezzar, and there was a reason for it, the first Beis Hamikdash, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, you were ever allowed. How do you do that? There's other ways to try to teach a lesson or correct a problem or whatever. You don't have to go and destroy a Beis Hamikdash. So the answer is the exception of when you're allowed to destroy a shul is if you're building another one. If you need to build another one, and in order to build it, you need the space, you're redoing it, or whatever it may be, that's the exception with certain details where you're allowed to destroy it. So that's the only halacha, or the only way that you're allowed to do it, is by recognizing that Hashem was doing this to build a third one. And the third one is better than this one. How is it better? Because it's nitzchi. It's eternal. It lasts forever. He would never destroy a Beis Hamikdash if it's not building a better one. That's usher. He wouldn't do that. And we have to have that attitude when we look at the whole 3 weeks and the 9 days. And obviously, halacha has restrictions and things that you're not allowed to do. But at the same time, we try to find things that we could do and that we should do. For example, we learn Hilchos Beis HaBechira. We learn halachas of the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Because when you learn about it, first of all, it's as if you did it. That's the power of learning Torah. But it hastens Mashiach's coming. You're learning about the structure of the Beis Hamikdash and the measurements and where things were and how they were. So we're involved in the Beis Hamikdash, not just mourning the fact that it's gone, but let's see how it's going to be rebuilt. How's this going to work? How was it designed? That's one aspect. And the other aspect is that we try to have more Avos Yisrael. And we're optimistic because we know the whole reason why this happened was to rebuild and build a better one. Otherwise, Hashem wouldn't do it. When you think about it, you see it in a whole different light. That this is a preparatory stage. We're on the way to have it being rebuilt. This Shabbos, the Shabbos Mevarchim, we bless the new month of Av. And Chazal tell us, Mishenichnas Av, when the month of Av comes, Mematin b'simcha, we reduce in joy, we decrease in joy. The Rebbe learns this girsa and inserts another word. He says, Mishenichnas Av, When
Besimcha.
of comes mimatin, right? You decrease. What do you decrease? You decrease in negativity.
Yes.
In Averis.
And
How do you
yes,
decrease in negativity? Bisimcha.
besimcha.
He says just one word. What Chazal are really telling us is
Beautiful.
decrease in all negative things, and the way you'll decrease in that is through joy. Now, it's not okay to make a wedding, right? We can't get haircuts. We can't buy new clothing, prominent clothing, and so on.
Ahavat chinam.
Live, exactly. But there's mitzvahs that you could do, and a mitzvah brings joy, and that's kosher joy. It's allowed every day. And learning Torah brings simcha. And we have to learn Torah. It says even on Tisha B'Av, when you can't learn Torah, there's Torah you could learn, which is the appropriate Torah, like Yirmiyahu or other things. So as we start the Shabbos and we're getting into that month, we should know, number one, it's the best time for Mashiach to come, because the only reason why it was destroyed is to be rebuilt. Number two, we have to do what we can to fix it. And number three, joy is always the solution. Have a good Shabbos. Thank you for
There
joining.
was another example of destructions, not by God, but by Moshe. It's the tablet. When it was the tablet,
Very good.
destroyed it.